Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us for yet another episode of BSU. BSU.
Her whole intro.
We are so glad that you decided to join us again this week. Last week we talked about the black dollar, and the impact of spending your money in your community and things of that nature. And uh, it just dawned on me, we didn't even share the link. We had intended to share with you all a link.
Yeah, we did. We did intend to share the link with you all. However, the link, when we checked it, it was down for maintenance. So I just checked it. We all just checked it today, and it is up and running. So we will have the link provided to you at the end of this episode. But a little bit about the link, it's called myblackreceipt.com, and it's if you spend money with a black business, you will upload your receipt. So they ask you some questions like, what kind of business is this? How much did you spend? Things like that. And then it must, once you submit it, they add it to the total number of receipts that they have, and they calculate it up, I believe, the total number of dollar amount that was spent. And right now they're at their sixth goal. I don't know what the numbers were before, but this goal is to reach 2 million. And as we were talking before recording, they were at 1.4 million. Now they're at 1.7. So it's rolling in. They update it every 10 minutes. And it's just a way to track to see how much money people are spending within the black community from June 19th, which was Juneteenth, up until July 6th. So I'm excited to see the outcome. So we will have that link provided to you at the end of this episode or during this episode.
Yes, so please go and check it out. Purchase. Within reason, we don't want y'all to go in debt, but
Right.
you know,
Yes, exactly.
if you're making any purchases, please upload it just so we can see how we're doing in our community, in our black community, and keeping our black dollar in our black community. Okay, so that actually got me thinking about many conversations I've been having this week with other African Americans about this logo change that they're discussing for products like Ancient Mama, Uncle Ben, the cream of wheat, the Eskimo pie, even though that man is not black, but okay, just for example.
Right.
So take a look at this picture and tell us what you think about this image. We're still waiting for those emails to come in. We want to hear your thoughts. Take a look at this. So what do y'all think? What's the first thing to come to mind?
The word that's in my mind is violence.
Well, while Tori ponders, let me fill you in. So this was the original Ancient Mama logo on the Ancient Mama product, right? And then in the 80s, sadly, as late as 89. So I don't know about you, when I think 80s, I think early mid 80s, but 89s, they really could have said in the 90s at this point. But anyway, as late as 89 is when we got the new Ancient Mama logo with the perm. They gave her a perm. Why they give Sister Girl a perm, I'll never know. But they gave her a perm and put some pearl earrings on her, which was, I guess, in their mind, an improvement from the do-rag, you know, the headscarf, the red headscarf, and her attire, as you saw in the photo there that was shared. I personally was taken aback by it because of the fact that that woman was chained. So this is clearly a photo of a person in servitude who was preparing food for the massa. Some of the conversations that are taking place in the black community around it are, oh, now you want to take her off your box, you know, kind of a thing, and how we are feeling about that. And there's been a lot of mixed reviews. Even in having conversations in my personal circles, I've heard some mixed feedback and thoughts on it. I too am not settled on how I feel about it. It really just depends on how much black conversation I'm having that day, you know, will determine where I'm fitting in with it. But I'm just wondering how you all are taking it in. We want to hear your input. We're looking for those emails. Write in, let us know what comes to mind when you see the image, and then what are your thoughts about the intentionality of them making those changes. But since y'all haven't wrote in yet, I'm going to hear from my two co-hosts first.
Kara, if you want to go first, you can, because I know that you were getting ready to talk, and then I can jump in right after you. Whatever works.
Okay. I think it has me thinking about... It has me thinking about a lot of things. Like you, Denitra, I don't know that I'm totally... I don't feel one specific way and have one specific thought about it. It has me thinking about performative allyship. It has me thinking about why this time, like why this particular moment in history is when so many companies are seeming to evaluate themselves. And it has me thinking about representation too. Something that I know is in an article that all of us read this week about this issue that the families of the different women who have been models for Aunt Jemima over the years, some of them, I think two of them, are speaking out and saying, I don't want you to change it. I don't feel like this feels like this feels like erasure. And something that I'm really considering is how we as Black people have been maybe socialized to have certain standards of treatment and community that we are always giving, that we are always doing for others. And when it comes time to do for ourselves, or when it comes time to claim for ourselves worthiness and greatness and fair, I don't want to say equal treatment, because our history shows that we are very good at speaking up to that. But in these things as representation, if Aunt Jemima is as good as we can get, and then that feels like it's being taken away, it makes perfect sense that we would then feel really badly about that. And I think something that I'm thinking about, and I want to be so clear, I'm not thinking that any, like I said, no one specific thought, but something that is like in my mind is whether this couldn't be a great opportunity to look at that feeling of feeling abandoned and instead see it as an opportunity for liberation, like an opportunity for us to imagine something greater and a greater, more beautiful image of ourselves, of our community, and also really logistically, practically, a great opportunity to start buying products from our own communities, and having these intra-community conversations instead of waiting for a syrup brand to like have this conversation or start this conversation for us. And I know that so many of us have been talking specifically about Aunt Jemima and more generally about representation for so long, for so long. But I think this moment might be an opportunity instead of a blow, or maybe both.
That would be dope. Before I pass it over to Tori, that would be dope if they changed the logo to an African American with a fro, with a pick in it. Listen, I will buy a year's worth of syrup today. But anyway, go ahead.
So you asked what are our thoughts on it, and it makes me think back to when I would see the image of Aunt Jemima in a grocery store, and without even knowing like the history behind it or anything, I always looked at it as, we've seen movies throughout life that are made to depict, Black people, and with a lot of these movies having Black women in the kitchen almost as a maid. So whenever I would look at, the images of Ancient Mama, my mind always went there, and I always thought like, that's not a good image, and just kind of a little bit more curious about knowing the background on it. And I know, like, wearing a headscarf to bed, or even like if you're lounging around the house, you have your headscarf on. I remember like having individuals almost make jokes like, oh look, it's Ancient Mama, but saying it in a way, not like a positive way, but always negative. So that always led me to believe that, okay, the image of her on whatever pancake box, syrup, whatever it may be, that it's not positive. So I know, Denitra, you said something about like, why remove the image now? And I just think now, with what's going on in the world, some people, some organizations, what have you, are taking that step back. Some of them to do almost like a self-check, like, okay, is this right? Should we move forward this way? And thinking specifically for Ancient Mama, and you just said, Anitra, and this isn't for us to go like back and forth in battle, but like, oh, if they put a Black woman on there with an afro and a pick, what's the point of putting an African American woman on this if it's not made by African American people? I'm not saying they cannot have Black people as a logo, but I want to know the intent behind it. What's the correlation to it? Like, because from what I hear with the story is Ancient Mama is almost like those, I don't know how to pronounce it, those plays that happened around slavery time. The minstrel, is that how you pronounce it? Minstrel shows. Yep. Right, that her image came from something dealing with that, and we know that is not being positive for Black people. So those are just my thoughts on it. I'm curious to see where the company goes. If they just ditch the whole idea of having a human as a logo, maybe they will put something like a symbol. I'm curious to see what they will do with that, and I guess only time will tell. So,
Gosh, you make a good point, Tori. I don't think that I can recall, because there have been a lot of that, and I'm not about to go into other cultural experiences, but I recall seeing this in depth. I know in the last couple years, many organizations and companies and things of that nature have been reconsidering the portrayal of their logo and how that may negatively impact that particular community and the trauma they may feel, or the embarrassment, or whatever may be associated with it that's not positive. So this comes at a time that I'm not as surprised, especially given the racial climate that we are suffering at this time. I'm not as surprised about it, but I was thinking, as you were saying, Tori, I can't think of a single occasion where a company moved from using a human imagery to like a chart or a drawing. I don't know.
I don't know what you mean.
Like, I was, as you were talking, I was like really trying to ponder, like, yeah, what direction would they go? Because two questions I have for you two real quick then. How do y'all feel about a non-Black person bringing this to the table for consideration? More specifically, a white person is who submitted it for consideration. And then also the follow-up question to that is, then how would we feel if they removed the Black image from there altogether and used a different person that wasn't Black? Would that be worse? Before y'all answer, while y'all ponder it, we want y'all to write in at home too and let us know.
What conversation?
Your thoughts.
Conversation.
Yes, but go ahead, Tori. You were going to say.
And I heard that recently, that I think someone brought that up, like, oh, what if they took the Black woman away and put another woman there that's not of the Black community? And I can see, like, in my opinion, I can see others getting upset in terms of saying, like, oh, they took the Black woman down, they put this woman, like, as if, this isn't good enough. But I think with me, it would go back to, what was the point of you having Ancient Mama first on here? If it was to enforce that stereotype, then what does that mean for you putting another woman or even a man on here? Are you still enforcing stereotypes, or was it just for the Black woman? So those would be the questions I would have. And I think too, the name Ancient Mama, like, even that aunt part of it, you know, we know being in a Black community, referring to our elders as uncle this or aunt that, and you know, just a different sign of respect. I think the name is almost attached to the image as well. So do they ditch the name and the image as well to get at something that's not so specific to a group? And those are just questions that I have, that I'm just curious to know. Was this Black woman put on here purposefully to reinforce a stereotype of Black women in general?
Oh, that's a whole lot of rebranding.
Exactly. So
what you got for us, Kira, before we say goodbye?
Something that I'm thinking about two things. And I'm thinking about how Black women, how this stereotype, the mammy stereotype, comes from this house slave, like, and I'm saying that in quotes because I prefer to say enslaved, because that puts the impetus back on the people who did that. Not as if that's like an inherent identity that we carry. But this house slave idea that like her cooking is somehow superior because of God knows what stereotypes. And also potentially that her cooking had to be superior as a matter of survival, because if it wasn't, right, you know what would happen. And so I'm really thinking about using that history to say, this is our syrup, it is this good, right? Like, and how messed up that is. And I have two thoughts that are like happening. One of them is, I don't know if any of you like poetry, but you should look up the poetry book Voyage of the Sable Venus by Robin Cost Lewis. She has, the middle section of the book is all about how Black women's bodies have been used as comb handles or legs on tables, or how they've been in paintings and in this like very intense way. I'll just say that. And then the last thought that I have is changing the outside logo that everybody sees might be a good move, but is it matched by pay equity in the organization? Is it matched by equitable hiring practices? Is there an HR department that is actually going to listen to Black women and not then subsequently push them out of the organization for being too angry, too loud, or having values outside of the organization's values, right?
Or wearing natural
For me, like this outer change is only part of it. And so I'm much more concerned with the internal change of the culture, the work culture, and what the ripple effect of that might be in other work cultures in this industry and in other industries than the outward logo.
Whew, you said that better than what I was going to say. So I'm going to use that opportunity to say, thank you all for joining us. Our intention here today was just to bring at the forefront of your mind how we are represented in our Black community, in your local community, in your school community, in your organizations that you are affiliated with. You know, just be mindful of how that looks and how we feel about how that should look. Mm-hmm. And then what can we do to change that? So thank you for joining us for yet again. We gave you a couple actionable items, so we want to see you put some action in place and write it. Yes. And let us know. We really are wanting to hear your thoughts. So let us know your thoughts on this. Thank you for joining us. See you next week for another episode of BSU. BSU.
Yes.